Yeah, so I mean, the year is 2015. People are dancing to Gangnam Style. I think that was popular in 2015. Warlords of Draenor challenge modes are being ran, and the fastest one is being done in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Oh, what a different time. Yeah, these dungeons look a bit different now that they are M+ dungeons. Of course, Season 4, we've got, Grimrail Depot, Iron Docks, Karazhan, Mechagon all returning, and it's gone pretty interestingly this first week. I will say I personally have found it. I expected to have a lot of fun with it, and I have been having a lot of fun with the returning dungeons.
I was really surprised. And so, like, I feel like through Shadowlands, there was just like a lot of times where I wouldn't feel like super compelled to log in. But these days, just with like the new dungeons and like the Faded raid, I felt a lot more inspired to just be logging in. I've been having a lot more fun with just like the new dungeons, and it kind of like changed my perspective on a lot of things in regards to the importance of like adding new content at a higher frequency, because even things that are like this for fun season that it's like not taking everything super serious, this is I've been having a lot of fun.
Yeah, and even though, these aren't new dungeons, right? It's like returning ones. It's still just the rotation, changing it, seeing something new.
Okay.
Or like that is fresh is cool.
Okay, so we have a couple of things to cover today. We're going to be talking about like how the dungeons have gone, talk about like what the future in Dragonflight is going to look like with kind of like these refurbished dungeons, maybe what we could see be picked by Blizzard, that kind of thing. So I guess first thing to cover, how have the returning dungeons from Warlords of Draenor and Legion gone? So we have Grimrail, Iron Docks, and both of the Karazhans. I think the Mechagons, for most people, they're new enough to where like they've been kind of avoiding criticism in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, it's also clear that they are tuned to at least Junkyard, right? Is like a free keystone for coordinated groups, whereas the Karazhan dungeons, for instance, are being done at a much lower level, right? Like we've got
It's nerf. I mean, there's literally already been a nerf to lower.
Yeah, there has, and there's a lot of mechanics in there that are like pretty nasty, and bosses that are pretty tough. Whereas Junkyard, you get your shock bots going, right? People are two chesting 27 Junkyards, whereas lower there's only one group that's timed to 24 so far, and the next highest key timed is a 22 in there. So
if you keep talking, I'll pull up Raider.io. 1 second.
Yeah, huge disparity currently between the Karazhan ones and Junkyard Workshop, right? Like 5 key levels between the upper and Junkyard in terms of what's been done so far. And yeah, it does feel qualitatively different to go to those dungeons. Like the HPS check on Shade of Medivh, for instance, compared to anything that's in Junkyard or Workshop is just like night and day difference.
I mean, this world first upper Karazhan required 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 healers.
Yeah, that was a good strategy. That's a good strategy. So if you could do that, they could probably go even higher than that. And to be fair, that is a 2-chested run as well. Although the old dungeons, man, upper, I'm remembering that the upper timer was always so lenient. You just had to be able to actually kill the bosses, right? Like that was always the hard part.
World first 28 in upper Karazhan, whenever it was current, was 2-chested. Like it was one of those things that you would. There were a lot of world first runs with a full wipe on a boss, and you pull it again, kind of thing.
Whereas in Shadowlands and in BFA, it became much more common that like a world first run had to be flawless, because it's not like the bosses were that impossible, right? It's just like you were pushing the key to a level where it's like, okay, we have the DPS check over the whole dungeon being really tight now, and if we wipe once, we're not gonna hit it, right? So very different texture of a dungeon for sure.
How have you been feeling about them? So I think that they've actually received a decent amount of community backlash in regards to tuning. I think that that's been the main criticism, is that the Legion and Warlords dungeons specifically, less Iron Docks, more like Grimrail Depot, and then both of the Karazhans, they're just overtuned too much. How have you been feeling about it personally?
So I'm cautious to advocate for too much this early, but I do think it does hold like, if you can 2-chest one of the dungeons on a 27. Now, to be fair, Junkyard is like, obviously, like you've got the shock bots going on in there, right? So that one's different. But like, if you've got the Tazaveshes, right, that are being done also on 27, 26, and then you go to Karazhan and it's like, well, those same keys at this level are completely impossible, right, for the group. And it's not like these aren't like people are making this case that it's like, well, people just doing 15s don't know the mechanics yet and are going to learn those, but like these are the top are good groups, right, that are doing 26 Tazavesh or whatever. These are some of the top teams from last season that it's not like Shade of Medivh is like too much for their brain power. It's just like, oh, the HPS check on this is like 50k HPS in a plus 25 or something like that. So I do think there are imbalanced things between the dungeons, and if that continues, if that's not something that I know it's early in the season, so like maybe people figure it out, but it's not just like at plus 15s you can't zerg these dungeons, which is maybe something that would be fine to be true. It's like I feel like it's pretty clear that the Karazhans are just on a different level than the Tazaveshes and the Mechagons.
I've definitely been an advocate of like these probably should at least take some time before we really establish like what should be nerfed, because Blizzard's never going to come back and just like rebuff a dungeon realistically. And so like once the nerfs are final, like that is basically set. I do think that the delta between the top and the bottom end is problematic, specifically with Junkyard. I don't think that like the Tazveshes, even while they're being done on 27s, they definitely have like a different texture, right? The timer is of issue. In addition to that, we see like runs being lost fairly regularly in the Tazaveshes. They're also new, and so like nobody really knows the route for Junkyard. People are actually just walking in here. And
Junkyard is unoptimized in his 27-2 chest, and Gambit is optimized relatively. Obviously, Shrouded we got to figure out and stuff, and it's 27-1 chest, right? So yeah, Junkyard is like the biggest outlier of any of these dungeons right now for high keys. For plus 15s, I think that it's also a problem that like for plus 15s, I do think it's also a problem if like there are some dungeons you can go into and like mechanics are punishing but not one shots, and other dungeons you can go into where every boss has something that one shots you if you screw it up. It's like, shouldn't the keystone level kind of be a standardizing factor, and you get to a point where within a couple keystone levels, all the dungeons move from things being punishing but don't kill you to one shots. And on like in lower Karazhan, Willbreaker's one shotting you on a plus 12 or something.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. I think it's I think that there are a lot of like just random intermittent mechanics in lower Karazhan specifically that probably need to just be tapped a little bit and nerfed in a minor way. I think that just being super heavy-handed and calling for nerfs on everything very early is a dangerous game, though. So I think that like just in general, I would like to see it maybe wait like a week, maybe even 2 weeks potentially to hit down these Karazhans and like Grimrail Depot, because I think the Grimrail Depot last boss, that one is one that like it's unavoidable lightning damage and it's hitting people to 20% HP on like a 16 or a 17. You're like, does that really feel fair? Maybe not.
Yeah.
People now like sitting in like this spot that's off to the side, and it's like avoiding.
You still take the damage, you just don't take the dot. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Are things like that? Are things like that really okay? It's kind of hard to tell as well. But I suspect that there's going to be some tuning to some of these more difficult dungeons. It's just like a question of what really needs to be slapped down, and then what is just an overreaction to the dungeons being new and difficult. Because Medivh in particular, it's one that like I've seen a lot of complaints about Medivh. If the flame wreath may be a little bit too challenging, and that may need to be nerfed, but then I've seen a lot of complaints about people just talking about the amount of interrupts that are required for that boss, and that's just like a fundamental design decision. And it's like, okay, how would you nerf that? And like, is that something that should be nerfed in dungeons?
Well, yeah, it's just a question of like how much of this coordination do we want in the plus 15, right? Like, is that something where we want this many kicks to be that vital, or do we want to reduce the penalty for missing some of those? Because like either way, you probably are still dodging all the Inferno bolts and kicking as many casts as you can in a high key, right?
Okay, so this is an issue of bringing back old dungeons just in general, is like these mechanics that were core integral parts of bosses, they are being refurbished, but like the boss is still going to maintain its identity, even to the detriment of like the boss itself, right? And to some groups, because the mechanics in Upper Kara on the bosses are hard.
Yeah, except for Mana Devourer, which currently doesn't seem to be exploding. We'll see when the hotfix comes in to fix that.
Yeah. Anyways, all right. So, in addition to this, this means that we should probably segue and start looking forward. Dragonflight, how they had this announced, and we actually saw a lot of pushback. There was going to be 4 unique Dragonflight dungeons and 4 like legacy return dungeons. We know that 2 of the legacy return dungeons are going to be Court of Stars and Temple of the Jade Serpent. 2 are unknown, but they were announced to be a Legion and a Warlords dungeon. So that's going to be the 4 returning dungeons. How are you kind of feeling about that now after we've like seen a little bit of like what these refurbished dungeons can look like?
Yeah, I still, I mean, I've always liked the idea of doing this with M plus seasons. I still think I would rather see just the 8 Dragonflight dungeons for season 1 and then just start filtering in new ones season 2 plus. I'm still on that team. But I mean, yeah, I'm glad that this one seems to be doing a good job of upping the freshness, and I think that, Temple of Jade Serpent, Court of Stars, I don't know about Temple of Jade Serpent. I feel like that one may end up being a kind of mid dungeon for me. Court of Stars also. I'm a little bit worried about Court of Stars in a profession expansion, because like I'm kind of hyped looking at all this profession stuff to like do some professions and pick 2 and like go into their talent trees and stuff like that. And I feel like if I have to, move my profession to blacksmithing so I can do Court of Stars or whatever, I'm going to be kind of tilted. So that might be a little bit of a pain.
I've been a big advocate of like have all of the professions open inside of Court of Stars just in general, and then that way you could only select like say 3 or 4 of the buffs, but you at least know what buffs you have in the beginning, so you can select from all of them, and you know what buffs your group has available to you, so that way you're not going to be just like RNG'd into not having as many or potentially even any buffs. And so I think that could actually provide a pretty decent solution if they're looking for like a mechanics refurbish in a dungeon. For Jade Serpent, I don't know necessarily how they're going to change that dungeon too much, because I don't want to say it's like Grimrail Depot, because it's not on that same level, but it's very basic is what I will say about Jade Serpent. It is short also, which is going to be nice. I think that dungeon being somewhere in the order of, it looks like a 20-minute dungeon or something being super short like
probably
that.
Like a 30-minute timer. Yeah.
That'll be cool. I think that they are at least erring in the side of shorter dungeons rather than longer dungeons for Dragonflight, which to me looks really solid. I think that with this season as well, something that we didn't really talk about, I think that the addition of new content, specifically on the dungeon front, and just adding in this many new dungeons, I'm really interested to see how this changes between season 1 and season 2. So we're going to get like all 8 dungeons completely replaced going from season 1 to season 2 in Dragonflight, where you're going to get 4 brand new Dragonflight dungeons, and then again 4 more refurbished dungeons, and that kind of thing. I could see that being super positive, especially if we get the similar feeling to what we have right now, where it's like all this new discovery. What is the new seasonal affix looking like? What are these new dungeons really feeling like? And then like assuming the tuning is pretty decent, I could be super stoked and super excited for things like that.
Yeah, I'm still a little worried about like, is this too much churn for, mid expand, right? Like, that feeling at the start of expansion of like discovery, everything's new. That sort of thing's fun, but then are we really going to have that again like 5 months later? Is it going to be fun again to like throw everything that you've just learned out the door, and you're now coming into Dragonflight season 2 with no carryover knowledge of the dungeons, no carryover knowledge of the seasonal affix, like none of that. So that's part of why I think it would still have been better to do 8 Dragonflight dungeons season 1 and then rotate half of them out, and then you get like right now this season we've got the Tazavesh that's carrying over from last season, right?
Yeah.
I feel happy when I see a Tazavesh key. It's like, oh, I know this place, right? Like, this is a dungeon I know. Mm-hmm. It's got some new twists and it's got the new seasonal affix, right? But like, it's nice to have some that are somewhat familiar. And I especially worry, like, I play this game a tremendous amount, right? But somebody who plays this game 10% as much as me, right, is going to be, I think, even much more in danger of an overload on this. So I am worried about the season 1 to season 2 change in Dragonflight for that reason, but I'm kind of worried about it for other people, not for me. For me, I'm sure it's going to be a blast to, and obviously, like, we're going to get to make a lot of good videos because a lot of people are going to need some help.
Gosh, exploit the people.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm at least a bit more optimistic now. I'm willing to see it out in a more meaningful way, where I'm like, okay, I think that this will be cool. And you know what? If it sucks and the players hate it, I'm sure they'll never do it again, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what. Honestly, the thing that I was worried most about with season 4 was I was worried about people hating the whole thing, like especially like the deterministic loot and stuff as well, right? Where it's just like these all sound like such great ideas, and then the discourse around season 4 was kind of negative on Twitter for the last couple months before it came out. But it seems like it's gotten more positive, at least in the circles I follow. But I don't know. The thing I've learned as well is that we look at a very narrow slice of how the WoW community as a whole is feeling. So hopefully the broader community is feeling well. Perhaps members of said community in the comments below can inform us of their sentiments, and we can get a little bit of an idea there.
I hope they've been enjoying it, because I've been really having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 2 dungeons that are returning, other Legion and Warlords dungeons. anything spring to mind is like, okay, this is something that they should absolutely bring back. Because I think for the Warlords dungeons, there were a lot of stinkers. There were a lot of really, really bad Warlords dungeons. I think the one that I would recommend them bringing back is probably Everbloom Wilds. Just because it's more modern with like what's going on.
When people complain about Grimrail Depot and are like, why didn't we have this instead? This is usually Everbloom, Auchendoon. I don't know how to pronounce that. I didn't play WoD.
It's Auchendoon.
Skyreach. I've heard somebody comment. Somebody said Blackrock Spire as well, which I think, that was a pretty unbiased. So I think Everbloom and whatever that one is,
Auchendoon,
that one. That's what I was saying. Yeah, could be good ones to do from WoD.
I just think that like in general, Everbloom is more. There's like a route that you can take. There's a couple of different routes you can take. It's not like the most modern thing. Like it's still you still have to go through like one specific route realistically, but there's at least multiple paths of trash that you can grab. You can actually do some skips. There's some like modern Mythic Plus stuff that you can do in Everbloom Wilds, and I would recommend that one being the one that he brought back. Legion, any major contenders that like kind of jump out? We do have Legion Time Walking, and so we've kind of played these dungeons
apparently
recently.
Legion Time Walking is like going away in Dragonflight because of this, I've heard.
Oh, well, we have Legion Time Walking next week, right?
Yeah, I think it's going away starting maybe in Dragonflight. I'm not 100% sure on this. I might be gaslighting everybody, so that's something we can look into further. But
I don't think that's how gaslighting works, but yeah, okay, continue.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's I think Eye of Vajara would still be one I'd be down to see again, even though it's been in the Time Walking one. If you look at the ones that like aren't in the Time Walking, like that we haven't had in Legion Time Walking,
IMO.
What are the other options, right? It's like there's Seat and Cathedral. Those people do not like those, right? Those ones have pretty negative sentiment. Although I think both of those dungeons were pretty good, and maybe if they were if they were new along with everything else being new, they'd be better received.
Maw maybe is like the only one that got that's not in Legion Time Walking that I would be like, this could be brought back.
Actually, you know what? Some tinfoil. The motion sickness potion in Grimrail Depot, works for Maw of Souls as well. It's like it says this works only in Grimrail Depot and Maw of Souls. So maybe they're planning ahead. Maybe they already have Maw of Souls planned too.
That's actually good tinfoil. They also picked a lot of really short dungeons, so it wouldn't shock me. I think that on my list is probably like Eye of Vajara would be like the number one pick for me because I think it's like the most Mythic Plus like Fungeon level dungeon, and then probably Maw is like a steep drop off per second contender. I just think that like the other Legion dungeons, outside of like
no interest in Archway.
It's 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's the problem.
I didn't mind Archway, but I think that we've been moving away from the 45-minute like mega dungeons, and I think that like people hate them.
A season that has some like 25-minute dungeons and some 45-minute dungeons is going to be really imbalanced in terms of like. I remember that was a big problem in Legion, right, where they had to go and rebalance artifact power drops between Halls of Valor and Maw of Souls and stuff, so that it wasn't just like a dead key. Yeah.
Okay. Last thing. Let's talk about loot tables. So we've actually seen kind of refurbished-ish loot tables from...
not really. Like, they haven't really changed anything or made new items or anything for the old dungeons, but they went through and removed a couple of, like, things that obviously wouldn't, like Azerite armor or whatever.
Well, they also removed, like, the 6 copies of Shoulders from the Warlords dungeons as well.
They curated the WoD shared loot pool for Docks and Depot, yeah. I like it. I feel like it's cool, like, in Shadowlands, if it's like, hey, we're going to go do Spires of Ascension, what cool items are there from here? Most people wouldn't really have one, or like there's like one Agi trinket or whatever, right? It's like there are all the Sanguine Depths, right? It's like these dungeons, they didn't have memorable loot. If you said like Lower Karazhan, I have command, right? Or not, that's Upper Karazhan. Yeah, Drape of Shame from Lower Karazhan, right? Then you've got like Upper, you've got Drape of Shame. There's the Ring of Collapsing Futures, which is maybe not that sick.
Construct
Core, yeah. Mechagon, we've got the bit bands and the logic loops, right? Those rings. There's all kinds of items that are just kind of memorable. Hyperthread wrist wraps.
I got the bike so I can get run over in PvP.
Yeah, I mean, there's some memorable trinkets in some of the Shadowlands dungeons, although even those are usually kind of lower key. So I like that in Season 4, like basically every dungeon in Season 4 has items that I could name. The ones that I can't really name are like the WoD ones, which are kind of unique in their stat stickiness, right? like what the stat sticky trinkets that are in there, which
even the necklaces
also kind of
with
a niche.
Necklaces and rings with main stats specifically, which goes against the grain of like what they changed the necklaces and the rings to be. By the way, under budget if you want like a
those things are kind of bad, right?
those things are kind of stinkers. You don't really want them, but cool in the sense of like, okay, they have main stat on them. They could be cool technically if they were good.
Yeah, and those I wouldn't mind them going back and like potentially even buffing those. So that, I don't think they should buff them so that they're BIS for everybody, but like keep buffing them until somebody's using them would be my metric for what you should do with those rings and necklaces.
Yeah. Beyond that, like how do you feel about dungeons like Court of Stars having changed loot, or like is the current loot pool fine? Because Court of Stars has that auto attack ring as well, the 10% auto attack damage on it. It also had like a 2-set from Arcway, which I guess if Arcway's not back, it doesn't really matter, but say something like that. Would you even be okay with... Court of Stars by itself had the leather 2-set where it was like a mastery proc, didn't it? Yeah, it also had like a mastery proc 2-set. Would you be okay with
the other leather piece maybe did come from Arcway? I'm not sure though.
The Arcway Court of Stars thing was like a ring and it was like a trinket and a necklace.
Oh yeah, there was there were the leather. Yeah. Either way, like I don't know. I'm fine with things like that being like good. I'm fine with things like that being like better than other M+ items at that eye level. I think if we're getting to a point where it's like these are better than every other item in this item slot by a lot, by enough that like you have to turbo, like the Court of Stars auto attack ring. If it's like, yeah, the warriors that have this are doing 10% more damage than the warriors that don't. Yeah, I think that's probably something that they should tune down until it's just like, this is like the BIS ring, but it's, a little better than the others.
Rings of Collapse especially right now is 30 DPS gain.
Yeah, that's like totally fine. That's
trivial.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, stuff can be interesting, but I think that especially for the like non-trinket items, if you want to make some BIS trinkets in some dungeons and stuff, I think there's obviously precedent for that, and that works out okay. Although even that, they shouldn't be as turbo BIS as some of the Shadowlands ones were for a while.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same opinion. Like I don't know if I necessarily want the leather 2-set that had that massive mastery proc that I had to farm every single season. That one was a bit wild.
Yeah, to be fair, part of it, like part of the problem with M+ gear being turbo BIS was farming it every season. If the dungeons rotate as much as it looks like they might in Dragonflight, then that problem goes away.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I mean, it kind of alleviates the I have to farm IQD every single season phenomenon.
Right, exactly. It's like if one season is the IQD season, it's like, yeah, you farm this trinket, it's great. And then next season's like, okay, now you farm this trinket and it's great. That's much better than like
BIS one season maybe.
Yeah.
As long as it's not,
so that might fix it. Yeah.
As long as it's not 30% better or something. Like you feel like you can't play without it.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything else about loot pools? I think we kind of covered it. I think that's about how I feel about it too.
Yeah, I think this a lot of interesting stuff going on here. Again, very curious to hear what everybody thinks down below about all three of these kind of main topics we've gone through. But I think that's all I got.
That's all I got as well. All right, cool. I think we will see you guys in next week's video. I don't know what we're going to cover. Maybe like Faded Rage or something. But we will see you guys next week. Adios.